Graduate School of Business and the author of The Creator's Code, The 6 Essential Skills of Extraordinary Entrepreneurs. So, Amy Wilkinson.
I am here to tell you that the next wave of entrepreneurial leadership is actually being a creator inside a corporation. I'm not sure. There we go. So I spent 5 years at Harvard interviewing 200 top entrepreneurs that had started and scaled businesses to 100 million in revenue. That is the Creator's Code that David mentioned. At Stanford, what I'm seeing is that right now there's a new entrepreneurial frontier, and I believe that a girl and a guy, or a diverse workforce on top of a legacy platform, beats two guys in a garage, the classic Silicon Valley entrepreneurship model. And we're seeing this in the data, we're seeing it in the research, and we're certainly seeing it in the Stanford MBA population in terms of interest in large-scale companies. The skill set has got to be similar, and so this is what we're teaching about how to be entrepreneurial at scale. I'm going to give you 2 of 6 skills. This is somehow not advancing. Okay, this is skill number 2. So this is the idea that if you want to move fast, and we know that the economy is moving really fast, you have to drive for daylight. So you always have to be looking for the light on the horizon. People inside of large companies need to be doing this even faster. So there are reports that 40% of the S&P 500 won't exist in 2025. That these legacy businesses, if you can get in there and really be entrepreneurial, are going to win. If you can't, they're going to die. So what you want to be doing is looking always towards what's coming up in the future. And I'll give an example of Walmart. I've just written a case for Stanford on Walmart. I'm sure most of you know they're pivoting into the healthcare business. And it's an interesting example because they have stores within 90% of the US population within 10 miles. They serve 70% of the US population within 5 miles. They have heavy assets. And what they're finding is, as retail is going online, and they're competing obviously against Amazon, that they are going to use that asset base to serve the customer, the Walmart customer, and what they're doing is setting up more healthcare. So that's a major entrepreneurial move for the world's largest company. It's Chinese military as the first employer in the world, US military as the second employer, and Walmart as the third largest employer worldwide. So they are looking ahead and saying, our customer makes approximately $75,000 in annual income. They serve lots of rural locations. What does the customer need? It needs access to healthcare and is very worried about cost of healthcare. Inside of Walmart right now, they run a $40 billion business that's just pharmaceutical and contact lens kinds of products. They are now expanding to do dentistry, primary care, women's care. They're going to have MRI machines that go around on wheels to different locations. They're actually going to pivot and make that the future of how they repurpose floor space. So they are very much driving for daylight. And if you want to be doing this, what you do is always look forward, not lines on the pavement, not competitors or traditional benchmarking, and certainly not rear view mirror, right? And so that's the analogy of how you are looking at scale and moving as fast as startups can. A second skill is number 5 in this 6 skills lineup. It's how do you network brain power? How do you actually tap into a diverse workforce? There are online ways to do it, there are offline ways to do it, and arguably large companies have an advantage here. They have more people, they have more diverse points of view. And this is the idea that you want a convergent thinker with a divergent thinker. You want an introvert with an extrovert. You certainly want an anthropologist teamed up with a computer scientist. You want all these different kinds of brain power that you can harness in order to solve problems in new ways. Okay. Okay, this is obviously teams, and we see lots of these different formations. There's research that shows diversity in problem solving goes up, and here's this counterintuitive finding. If you try to solve a problem just yourself, you tend to get it right 44% of the time. If you get other like-minded people or people who are trained similar to how you're trained, the solve rate for complex problems goes up to 54%. If you bring in an outsider, someone who is very diverse or from a different background, the solve rate goes up to 75%. And what most people think about this is that the outsider brings the nugget of knowledge. The outsider is the person who somehow cracks the problem. What the research shows is that's not the case. It's that every single person pays more attention. Every single person in the room speaks up. When you feel challenged, you actually do your homework, you sit a little taller, and you articulate to put forward what a solution would be. The easiest way to think about this is if you are with all Democrats and then you have a Republican come in, maybe that person brings the nugget of knowledge to solve a problem, but what it does is it makes everyone a little uncomfortable, a different point of view. Or, the same way, if you're with all Republicans and in comes a Democrat, the research is showing that it isn't necessarily the outsider that cracks the problem. It's the fact that there's tension, you're uncomfortable, you have debates, you see business as a form of debate if you are willing to have diverse people around you to solve problems in these ways. So the bottom line here is that the pain is worth the gain. People report that it's uneasy, they have conflict, they think they're less efficient. In fact, the solve rates almost double when you get diverse people together. So with that, large companies, again, have more people. They can tap into larger resources and have an advantage in a more entrepreneurial world. So I'll give one last study that I think is pretty interesting. And it's that in to-go thinking, if you are in fact driving for daylight and solving problems, what you do is focus on what's in front of you, right? What's to go. If you instead think, like much of business does, to date, how much ground have I already covered, you cognitively slow down. You lose motivation, you lose concentration. If you instead focus on what's ahead, you're 2 to 3 times more likely to get there. And this is shown with creating businesses. It's shown with sports. It's shown with academics. And so the easiest thing here to think about is if you're running a marathon and you're in mile 20, if you think, to date, the ground I've already covered means my feet are aching, my lungs are burning, I've already run 20 miles, you slow down. If you instead think I have 6 miles to go, you're 2 to 3 times more likely to complete that marathon, and you're 2 to 3 times more likely to have a better, faster trajectory. So it's very available for all of us to be thinking, okay, what's ahead? How do I pivot these businesses ahead, especially large-scale businesses? And the frontier, I'm trained originally as a sociologist. I also have an MBA. I'm interested in the people behind high growth and explosive growth. And really, as the frontier that we're seeing inside of Stanford, there's a desire by millennials or by our students to be having more scale and more influence. And so this is an advantage in recruiting the next generation of leaders who actually want to go to companies like Facebook, they want to go to Google, they want to go to large-scale legacy, to some degree, businesses, because the advantage there of all the data that's available, the reach, the distribution channel, and all of that means that if you want to change the world, a lot of the next generation is saying, I want to change the world by being an entrepreneur at scale. So. There we go.
So I want to ask you one or
Yeah.
two things. So talk a little bit about the research you did. So we don't have tons of time. I might have even sit down, but we'll sit down. You've done some amazingly thorough debriefing of business leaders. Just talk a little bit about some of that.
Yeah, so I interviewed these 200 entrepreneurial leaders and had a very rigorous methodology behind it. There were 10,000 pages of interview transcripts behind less than a 300-page book. So criteria in terms of starting and scaling, and then pattern recognition on 6 skills that are repeated across sectors, across different parts. This is a US-based data set, and I was in the White House economics team ahead of doing this. I know John Chambers was mentioning that startups have created the net new jobs in the United States. That's what the economics data shows. But I believe we're actually starting to see a shift on that frontier.
And what's interesting also, the company John was with is partly trying to re-empower the incumbents, and we'll hear Proterra, a totally different kind of company later today, talk about the same kind of thing. Well, anybody in the audience have a comment or question they'd like to jump in with? Okay, here. Let's identify yourself, please.
Sure. Oh, hi, I'm Franny Lee from Chegg. So in all of the research that you've done, as you're talking to all these companies, were there any key stakeholders that were popping out as being necessary to instill this kind of entrepreneur within a legacy big company to make it really go? Because you need that, right?
So it's really important to have the CEO and the C-suite on this. I mean, it doesn't necessarily trickle up from the bottom, right? And so if you want to be at scale and you want to be moving a large business, you have to have the top people doing that. So I'll give the example of Walmart again. Doug McMillon came out to Silicon Valley 4 years ago and said, Amazon is going to kill us. We're getting crushed. And met with all different tech leaders of large companies, of startups, et cetera, and basically said, what can we do? They stood up store number 8, which is a pretty interesting retail. Sam Walton's 8th store was the experimental store. So now inside of Walmart, they've got store number 8. They're doing 3 things that I think are pretty interesting. One, certainly buying in founders. So Mark Lowry and Jet.com was bought in there. But they are recruiting entrepreneurs to just walk in through their doors. So Jenny Flees, who was Rent the Runway co-founder, has just gone over to Walmart with this idea that, hey, that's an interesting set of assets globally to be an entrepreneur and work inside there. The third thing that Walmart is doing is raising up internal employees to be entrepreneurs. So there's a guy named Michael McGuire who is running a business called Local Theory, which is it's an AI and data play on merchandising. What merchandise should you put in each one of these stores as a local theory? He's worked 18 years for Walmart, grew up in Bentonville, Arkansas, and he competes pound for pound. His performance is equal to entrepreneurs that they've acqui-hired and entrepreneurs they've recruited in. So it's a pretty interesting thing to see. It takes a top-down emphasis. And Doug McMillon is also interesting. He's got on his iPhone that he carries around in his pocket this chart. I don't know how many people have seen this chart, but it shows decades where Sears is the #1 in the category. And then Walmart, for the last few decades, has been the #1. But you can see Amazon coming up. And so he is constantly thinking about the fact that they have to disrupt themselves and they have to be entrepreneurial, or they will fall just like Sears has fallen.
Thank you so much, Amy.
Yeah,
Really good.
thank you.